You know, you can always tell when someone has started to wake up. There's a subtle change in their eyes, not sadness, not arrogance, but something harder to describe. It's as if they've stepped one pace back from the world and are watching the dance instead of joining in. The laughter still happens, the greetings still sound familiar, but underneath it all, something no longer fits. Most people think that when someone withdraws, it means they've lost their spark, that they're lonely, bitter, or disillusioned. But what if it's the opposite? What if stepping away is not a symptom of despair, but the first sign of seeing clearly? You start to notice how so much of what passes for connection is really just noise. People trading fragments of distraction to avoid feeling the silence between them. You start to notice how conversation bends toward comfort rather than truth. How belonging depends on pretending that everything is fine. And one day, you simply stop pretending, not in rebellion, not with drama, but with quiet certainty, like setting down a heavy bag you've carried too far. You stop performing enthusiasm you don't feel. You stop agreeing just to belong. You stop trying to make noise in rooms that have forgotten what silence sounds like. And suddenly, there's space, vast, disorienting space between who you used to be and who you are becoming. It feels strange at first. People ask what's wrong. They try to pull you back into the rhythm. But deep down, you know something has shifted. The old games don't work anymore. The old conversations echo hollow. You've stepped off the stage, and for the first time, you can actually see the play. Today, I want to tell you about that moment, about what happens when truth becomes more important than belonging, when silence begins to feel like home. So let me ask you, when everything in you wants to wake up, will you dare to walk alone? It doesn't happen with thunder. It begins quietly in the middle of a conversation you've had 100 times before. Someone is talking, maybe about the weather, their job, some new irritation of the day. You nod politely, but something inside you slips out of sync. You hear the words, but not the life behind them. The laughter feels rehearsed, the outrage performative, the empathy slightly off-key, like an actor forgetting their line and improvising to keep the scene alive. You've seen this performance before, of course. You used to play your part perfectly. You knew exactly when to laugh, when to sympathize, when to insert the right comment to keep the flow going. You wore the mask so long that it fused with your skin. But now, as awareness sharpens, the stage lights start to burn. You notice how every remark is a subtle exchange of validation. I'll make you feel seen if you make me feel safe. And you realize that what passes for connection is often a contract of mutual pretending. It's a disorienting realization. You want to keep participating, it's easier, after all, but you can't unknow what you've seen. Every time someone asks, "How are you?" you can almost hear the silent subtext, "Please don't tell me the truth." You start to feel the artificiality of the script, and the words taste like paper in your mouth. There's a sadness in this, a soft mourning, because these are the same rooms you used to find comfort in. The same voices that once anchored your days now sound faint like echoes through glass. But rather than bitterness, what rises is clarity, the sense that everyone, including you, has been trapped in the same well-intentioned illusion. You don't walk away in anger. You simply stop performing. You let the pauses breathe. You stop filling the silence. And that tiny act of honesty, of not pretending, creates the first invisible wall between you and the crowd. The separation isn't punishment. It's the beginning of freedom, because the moment you see the play for what it is, you're no longer bound by its script. There comes a point when the performance itself becomes heavier than the silence it was meant to fill. You start to feel it, the weight of constant smiling, the strain of polite laughter, the effort of keeping conversations stitched together with threads of small talk. It's a strange fatigue, not of the body, but of the spirit. You lie awake at night, replaying how often you've said "I'm fine" when you weren't, how often you've nodded in agreement just to keep the peace. And you begin to wonder, what would happen if I simply stopped? Pretending is like carrying a lantern with too many hands on it. Everyone adds their expectations, their projections, their needs, until the flame inside grows dim. The light still flickers, but it's no longer yours. And the more you try to keep everyone else comfortable, the less room there is for your own breath. You realize you've been living as a version of yourself edited for public approval, polite enough to be liked, predictable enough to be safe. invisible enough to avoid conflict. But awareness is an unrelenting teacher. Once you see the cost of pretending, you can't go back. You start to notice how people use conversation as camouflage. How was your day? Really means, please don't disrupt the illusion that everything's normal. You see the choreography of reassurance, the fragile scaffolding of emotional safety that collapses the moment truth walks in. And so, gradually, you stop participating. You still care, but you no longer play along. You choose honesty over harmony, clarity over comfort. It confuses people. They sense something has shifted, though they can't name it. They call you distant, maybe aloof, when in truth, you're just tired of playing roles that shrink you. This is the paradox. The less you pretend, the more alone you seem, yet the lighter you become. Every mask you set down frees another inch of your breath. Every false agreement you refuse becomes a quiet act of courage. And one day, you notice something extraordinary. What you mistook for isolation is really the first taste of authenticity, the sweet, unfamiliar air of finally being real. At first, you think you can hold both worlds, the old one built on familiar patterns and the new one born of clarity. You try to stay connected, to meet people where they are, to keep things normal. But awakening doesn't negotiate. It moves through your life like a slow, steady tide, washing away what no longer has roots. The conversations that once fed you now taste like dust. The gatherings that once thrilled you now drain you before they even begin. It's not that you've become superior or detached. It's that the old currency no longer spends. The jokes, the gossip, the endless recycling of opinions, they no longer purchase meaning. You find yourself longing for silence even in a room full of voices. You listen, but your ears ache for truth. And the truth, once glimpsed, starts dismantling everything built on its absence. Relationships begin to fade, not with explosions, but with whispers. The phone rings less, the invitations slow. Some people drift away, not in anger, but in quiet confusion. They can't quite explain why your presence now feels different, only that something about you no longer reflects them back. You've stopped serving as a mirror for their illusions, and so they look elsewhere for the comfort of their own reflection. It's tempting to feel grief here, to see this loss as rejection. But look closer. What's really dying is the web of mutual pretending that once held everything together. You're not losing people. You're shedding the versions of yourself that required their approval to exist. It's a strange, sacred unraveling, a silent collapse that makes space for something truer to emerge. You begin to understand that real connection can't be built on habit or agreement. It can only bloom in the open field of authenticity, where nothing is forced and nothing is faked. So when your old world starts to crumble, don't rush to rebuild it. Let it fall, because beneath the ruins of who you were is the foundation of who you actually are, unmasked, unguarded, and finally, free. Silence has a strange way of unnerving people. We've been trained to fill every quiet moment with noise, to reach for the phone, the television, the conversation, anything that keeps us from hearing the sound of our own thoughts. But when you begin to wake up, noise starts to feel suffocating. You start craving quiet, the way a thirsty traveler craves water. And when you finally find it, that stillness without interruption, you realize it's not empty at all. It's alive. It's speaking, but in a language the busy world forgot. At first, that silence can feel awkward, even threatening. You sit in it and your mind starts to fidget. Every unresolved emotion, every unprocessed fear rises to the surface. It's like stepping into a still lake and watching the sediment swirl up from below. Most people turn back at that moment. They rush to call someone, to scroll, to talk. Anything to escape the confrontation with their own depth. But if you can stay, if you can sit still long enough, the water clears. The noise in your head settles. And what emerges isn't loneliness, it's presence. Silence, you discover, isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of everything real. It's the space where your own voice, buried under years of performance and people-pleasing, begins to whisper again. At first, it trembles uncertain, unused. But as you listen, it grows steadier. It begins to guide you. You start to see that the world fears silence because silence reveals truth. In quiet, You notice the subtle lies you've told yourself, the ways you've traded authenticity for acceptance. In quiet, you meet yourself without disguise. And slowly, what once felt unbearable becomes sacred. The silence you used to flee becomes your teacher. It doesn't give answers. It dissolves the need for them. It holds you like the night holds the stars, vast, patient, unhurried. And in that stillness, something profound begins to happen. You stop running from yourself and finally come home. There's a moment in every awakening when the scaffolding of identity begins to creak. The person you thought you were the one built from habits, memories, and other people's expectations starts to feel strangely distant, like an old photograph of someone you used to know. It's disorienting at first. You catch yourself using old language, old reactions, and they feel foreign in your mouth. You begin to realize that so much of what you called me was never you at all. It was an echo of the world speaking through you. Imagine fog lifting from a valley. For years, the mist was all you knew. It shaped your horizon, blurred your boundaries, defined your world. But as the fog thins, the mountain appears vast, silent, unmovable. That mountain is your true self. It's been there the whole time, waiting beneath the haze of personality and pretense. Seeing it for the first time is both awe-inspiring and terrifying, because once you recognize what's real, you can no longer hide behind what's false. There's grief in this process. You mourn your old roles, the reliable friend, the achiever, the entertainer, the caretaker. They gave you meaning once, even safety, but they were costumes. And when they fall away, you feel naked, exposed, unsure of who you are, without the applause of others. This is the dark night of honesty, when your reflection no longer matches the person inside. But don't rush to rebuild. The urge to form a new identity is just the ego trying to stay alive in different clothes. Instead, let the space remain open. Let it ache. Let it echo. Because in that vastness, something extraordinary is happening. You're not losing yourself. You're shedding everything that isn't you. And slowly, beneath the rubble of all those roles, a quiet presence begins to emerge. It doesn't need to prove, to please, or to perform. It simply is. You realize that who you are has nothing to do with what you've done or what anyone thinks. It's the still awareness beneath every story, the mountain that was always there, waiting for the fog to lift. There comes a time, often after a long stretch of silence, when you meet someone whose eyes hold the same quiet recognition as yours. You sense it instantly, not in words, but in the way their presence doesn't demand anything from you. It's not the electric pull of attraction, nor the comfort of familiarity. It's something subtler, deeper, like two candles burning in the same wind, separate flames, same air. These encounters are rare. You can't summon them, can't plan for them. They happen when you've stopped looking. When you've finally made peace with walking alone, life brings you another traveler who has also laid down their masks. There's no performance between you, no need to impress or agree. The silence that used to feel like a wall now feels like a shared language. You don't fill it with noise, you rest in it together. It's an entirely different kind of connection, not built on need, but on resonance. You see, most relationships begin with what's missing. I feel incomplete, and I hope you'll fill the gap. But when two awake beings meet, there's no gap to fill. Each stands whole within themselves, and the meeting becomes an overflow, not an exchange. You talk, perhaps, but it's less about trading thoughts and more about recognizing the same truth through different words. You can disagree without defending, share without performing, part without losing. There's no clinging, no ownership, no hidden negotiation for validation, just presence, pure, unadorned, unthreatened. And this, you realize, is what real companionship was always meant to be. Two people who don't complete each other, but witness each other. Two mirrors facing one another, not to reflect illusions, but to amplify light. You won't meet many like this. Most will pass through your life like actors from another play, speaking a language you no longer understand. But when one of these rare souls crosses your path, something quiet inside you exhales. You remember that walking alone doesn't mean walking without company. It means walking with those who also see, even if only for a moment, under the same open sky. By now, solitude no longer feels like a condition to be cured. It's become a kind of rhythm, a quiet pulse that moves through your days, steady and unhurried. You wake in the morning and notice how still everything is before the world begins its noise. There's peace in that stillness, not the peace of absence, but the peace of presence. The air feels clean again because you're no longer clouding it with endless striving to be seen, to be understood, to belong. You begin to see that walking alone isn't about leaving people behind. It's about walking with integrity one step at a time, in truth rather than performance. You no longer need to announce yourself or defend your solitude. You move like wind through tall grass unseen, perhaps, but shaping everything it touches. There's grace in this way of being. You find yourself listening more deeply, speaking less often. You notice beauty in small, unadvertised places, sunlight through curtains, the sound of rain on empty streets. You realize the world doesn't need you to fill it with commentary. It just needs you to be awake enough to see it. People may still misunderstand. They'll call you distant, mysterious, detached. But you'll know the truth that you've simply stopped living on borrowed energy. You no longer feed on approval or attention. You no longer spend your life negotiating your authenticity for the comfort of others. You are no longer a participant in the grand performance. You are its witness. And yet, this aloneness is not isolation. It's communion with life itself, with the rhythm of your own breath, with the quiet intelligence moving through everything. You begin to sense that your solitude serves a purpose. By refusing to join the noise, you become a space where silence can speak again. By walking alone, you remind the world what it means to walk awake. Because the truth is, you were never truly separate. You were just learning to stand in your own light. And once you do, you realize the path was never empty. It was simply waiting for you to walk it with your eyes open. And so, the road that began in confusion ends in clarity. What started as distance from others was never rejection, it was remembrance. You thought solitude meant losing connection, but it was only clearing space for a different kind of connection, one that doesn't depend on words, roles, or approval. You were not walking away from the world, you were walking back to yourself. Look back for a moment. The silence you once feared has become your sanctuary. The people who drifted away have made room for authenticity. The identity that collapsed beneath you reveals something vast and unshakable, the quiet truth that who you are has nothing to do with who you've been told to be. You're no longer trying to fit into a conversation that doesn't speak your language. You're learning to speak the language of truth, of stillness, of presence. There will still be days when the loneliness creeps in, when the old ache for company returns. That's natural. But now you know the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is craving the noise of others to drown out the silence within. Solitude is discovering that the silence was music all along. You don't need to fix yourself. There was never anything broken to begin with. The discomfort, the isolation, the strange quiet around you, these are not malfunctions. They are symptoms of awakening. You're shedding the layers of false belonging, the borrowed voices, the inherited fears. You're not collapsing, you're unfolding. So tonight, don't rush to fill the silence. Don't apologize for walking your own path. Sit with the stillness you once tried to escape. Feel how alive it is, how vast, how intimate. Let it hold you. Let it remind you that every ending was only an opening. You are not a mistake trying to fix itself. You are awareness remembering its shape. You are not isolated from life. You are what life looks like when it finally stops pretending. So take a breath, let the noise fade. The door has always been open. You were simply facing the wrong way. And when you turn, when you step through, you'll see that you were never walking alone. You were walking home.